Speaker.
I call Catherine Delahunty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's great to have the warm welcome from the government and an opportunity to speak on this bill, which is a really, really significant moment in terms of the history of this country. Now, there are many coherent arguments that have been articulated for months and months about the concerns around the TPPA, including related to the environment, Te Treaty of Waitangi, pharmaceuticals, the idea of genuine benefit to New Zealand businesses. The list goes on and on. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that this is not just about us. This is about a global movement of opposition to unfair trade. So every country which is associated with the TPPA has got its people's movements, its challenges to government, its legal challenges, where people have made every attempt to point out that this is not a trade agreement. This is an investment agreement. And it's an investment agreement to benefit the United States of America, more than their own government, more to do with their corporates. So the global corporates, who are beyond governments, will benefit from the so-called free trade deal. But the reality is that for people on the ground in ordinary life, they are legitimately raising issues about whether their medicines will become harder to access, whether in fact they will have the right to defend the environment, whether they will have real benefits to New Zealand-owned businesses who cannot compete with large-scale multinationals. So this bill is the first step in what is a very, very damaging process of further undermining the sovereignty of this country. So if we think first about the environment, a good example of why people are against the TPPA and this legislation is to do with investor-state disputes. An extraordinary process which involves courts which are not conducted by judges in rooms that are not open to public scrutiny, so that the powerful can talk to the powerful about their right to sue the governments who dare to stand up for them. And I'll give you an excellent example of that. Oceania Gold, who happen to have a large gold mine reefed in Macrae's Flat and also in my area of the Coromandel. They now own the former Newmont mine. They are suing under a free trade deal, very similar provisions as the TPPA. They are suing the government of El Salvador for $301 million for daring to say that they should protect their water. Their communities asked the government to stand up and say no, but because they'd signed the deal, it was impossible. So we have major problems with this deal. We have major problems with it in terms of the risk to the environment. Also, listening to Shane Reedy's speech, I just have to disagree about the interpretation of the clauses around the treaty. All of those clauses say that the government, the Crown, will decide whether the treaty is being breached. And hello, that's not Te Treaty of Waitangi. The Crown doesn't get to decide. If it was a genuine negotiation, and if the clauses in the TPPA said that tangata whenua will decide whether there's a treaty breach and they will advocate for that treaty breach, that would be one thing. But the Crown will decide. It's clear from Mr. Reedy read out the clauses, it's clear who gets to decide. It's clear that investor disputes won't apply if the government decides they shouldn't apply. But the government is not tangata whenua, and the government is not the treaty partner on both sides of the agreement. And that's why we have real concerns about the treaty clauses, and that's why some of our most senior Māori leaders, not the businesses that were apparently consulted, but some of our most senior Māori leaders in terms of constitutional law and treaty law, went to the Waitangi Tribunal and have raised issues supported by thousands of tangata whenua, because this is... And the tribunal got it wrong, because what they said was that the Crown's protection is sufficient. The Crown's protection is not sufficient. The articles of the treaty must be honoured in actuality, not through the Crown defining. There is not sovereignty of the Crown when you're talking about the articles of the treaty. It's a shared sovereignty arrangement, but that's a little bit deep for some of the members here. So we need to look at the long-term effects of a trade deal that will not be about trade. It will be about very, very minor access to a few other markets. And for all the hype, for all the claims, it turns out to be a very, very, very serious erosion of sovereignty in exchange for what? And that's why the Greens will keep fighting it. Kia ora tātou.